Okay, zone 3. Is it the sweet spot or that dreaded grey zone that's killing your progress? You've heard the warnings: fatigue, plateaus, burnout, but is this true? Today, we're cutting through the myths, defining zone 3, exposing the critiques, and revealing why it is still your secret weapon and exactly how to use it. This is easily a 10% improvement point on your marathon time or half marathon time. So stick around, this will improve your training. I'm Lee Grantham, a coach and a professional ultra runner who went from running a marathon in 4 hours and 25 minutes to running a marathon in 2 hours and 21 minutes. And there was a big jump up from my second marathon in 3 hours and 25 minutes to 11 months later running 2 hours and 37 minutes, which is a 48-minute improvement. And now I help runners around the world to make huge leaps forward in their marathon or their distance running training. And it's not uncommon to see 10, 20, even 30% improvements in your times. So if you've got the work ethic and the discipline and ideally a positive attitude, then please get in contact by booking a call in the link in the description. So what exactly is zone 3? Zone 3 sits between your first lactate threshold or LT1 and your lactate turn point or LT2. And the key characteristics are lactate is elevated above resting levels but remains stable over 30 to 60 minutes. In contrast, zone 4 above LT2 leads to unstable variables that drift upward, leading to exhaustion and reaching your VO2 max. And if you're running a marathon from 3 hours 30 or intending to run 3 hours and 30, all the way up to the world record, 2 hours, you're going to spend the majority of the time of that marathon in zone 3. And so zone 3 will give you that specificity, which is crucial for marathon training. So where does the grey zone debate come from? We've got to address those criticisms. Now, you would think that somebody like Training Peaks, with access to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people's data, sporting data, and specifically endurance sporting data, lots of runners would have a better grasp of training than this article suggests. But this is on their website. The grey zone, how to avoid the zone 3 training plateau. If you find yourself pushing harder and harder but not seeing the results in races, you're likely in a zone 3 running plateau. You're probably going too hard, too often, and not training slow enough, often enough. Training in the right zones. Zone 3 running is above aerobic pace and has some lactate response, which means that it isn't hard enough to elicit a desirable physical adaptation, and yet it's too hard to allow for day-to-day recovery. How to determine your training zones, and then there's a perfect picture which sums up the entire article. 80% of the focus is in zone 2, no mention of zone 1, and 20% of the focus is in zone 4 and zone 5. Clearly missing that zone 3. And the title of the picture is Keep Your Easy Days Truly Easy, zone 2, and your hard days hard, zone 4 and zone 5. Zone 3 running will leave you burning a mixture of carbs and fat, never making you super efficient at being a carb burner or a fat burner. Now, the best exercise physiologists in the world would have a field day with this. And remember, this is Training Peaks. Simply put, your hard days should be hard with a high heart rate in zone 4 or zone 5 for increasingly longer periods in accordance with your race goals. There is no major benefit to be gained from zone 3 training when you could be doing high-end zone 4 and zone 5, threshold or VO2 max. And finally, because I could go on, the benefits for speed, lactate endurance, and metabolism are maximized when you're doing top-end zone 4 and zone 5 work. And again there at the end, they've got a picture. Every hard day should be followed by 1 or 2 days of easy running. For example, Tuesday, zone 4, zone 5. Friday, zone 4, zone 5. And those 2 pictures we can use again because this exactly matches the typical setup in the UK club system. You go to the track, not the road, but a track on a Tuesday and a Thursday night and run as hard as you possibly can. Zone 4 and Zone 5. You race cross country or the road on a Saturday. And of course, that is an all-out effort. And then when it comes to Sunday long run, it's long, slow distance, which is exactly what these two pictures show. These warnings are serious and incorrect, but context matters. The only way in which Zone 3 training is in the gray zone is if you're meant to be running in Zone 1 or Zone 2, and you're essentially defeating the purpose of the session, whilst at the same time slowing down the recovery. And this is why, certainly if you're training for a marathon or more than an hour race, and I would argue any distance running, that Zone 3 is still the powerhouse when it comes to your training. Firstly, what are the best runners in the world doing? It's good to look at that, and perhaps we can't mimic the volume of the training that they're doing or even the volume of intensity of those quality sessions, but the way elite athletes have been training in that Zone 3 and used for many years, indicating its effectiveness, ineffective methods, for example, high intensity intervals on a daily basis, quickly fade away. And what we are getting all the time in running, especially as we've got access to so much information, is a really popular workout that is working for one athlete or one group of athletes. For example, the Norwegian 4x4. Talked about all the time at the moment in terms of boosting your VO2 max. And the studies are also there to show that it's effective in boosting your VO2 max. But what is better than Norwegian 4x4 or 4 times 4 minutes? What is better? Well, for start, 4 times 5 minutes would be a better workout for boosting your VO2 max. 4 times 8 minutes would be a much better workout at boosting your VO2 max. And if we're talking about how good Zone 3 training is, then it's good to look to the science. So what are the scientific benefits of working in Zone 3 versus Zone 4? Well, of course, you'd be able to accumulate much more volume in Zone 3. So more volume with reduced intensity, which of course will lead to less fatigue and therefore better recovery. Your hormonal responses differ below LT2 versus above LT2. Much faster recovery in Zone 3. Remember when we defined Zone 3 just a few minutes ago? Zone 4 above LT2 leads to unstable variables that drift upwards, leading to exhaustion and reaching VO2 max. So there's a non-linear fatigue progression. Dropping slightly below VO2 max pace enables significantly more work. And a really good example of this is the difference between the pace that you can run for 5K and your 10K pace. It's a small difference, but allows you to run for double the duration. Zone 3 allows for specific sustained effort without rapid fatigue, unlike Zone 4's uncontrolled drift. So in short, Zone 3 enables high volume training with 95% of the benefits of training in Zone 4, but with much better recovery, much more sustainable, and of course that leads to much more consistency over your training block, over your years of training. Now here's where it gets really interesting and for me fascinating, and you could go really deep on this one, but I'm just gonna hit that surface level. Controlling the intensity in Zone 3. Now of course, being at the bottom, right at the bottom of Zone 3 and being at the top of Zone 3 is a vastly different experience. Essentially the bottom of Zone 3 is a very similar experience of being at the top of Zone 2, and being at the top of Zone 3 is a very similar experience of being in Zone 4. And when you look at the perceived effort, then the bottom of Zone 3 would be a 5 out of 10, and the top of Zone 3 would be a 7 out of 10. And so it becomes a skill that you need to master if you want the very most out of yourself on marathon day. Knowing the difference of 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10 and 7 out of 10 in effort. And that takes practice. It takes consistently practicing at those levels and seeing the range that you've got within your Zone 3. But what this will enable you to do is you'll feel as if you could continue the session longer. You could extend, for example, 6 times 5 minutes to do 10 times 5 minutes. So not just 1 or 2 more reps like a Zone 4 session, but quite a bit more, and that means it's all under your control, it's all manageable. You're also able to start the cool down immediately and go into easy run mode, so zone 2. You're not completely wiped out after that last rep. So again, in summary, zone 3 feels comfortable and sustainable at that 5 to 7 out of 10 perceived effort. You're able to finish a zone 3 session and quickly get into easy running in zone 2. And the recovery is greatly increased versus zone 4 and zone 5. Okay, so marathon specific training and zone 3. Now, if you've been hitting that wall 30K, 35K, 20 miles, 22 miles, that can be one root cause or multiple root causes that we can fix. But coming from the UK club system, what I see is a lot of guys go into the track on a Tuesday and a Thursday and running as hard as they can. For example, 8 times 800 meters and striving for an 800 meter time because of Yasso's 800s, for example. So we can run really quick, and then often there's a race, all out cross country race or a road race on the Saturday, and therefore long slow distance on the Sunday. So we're doing the long slow distance in zone 2. We're doing the faster stuff on, from, in my opinion, the wrong surface on the track in zone 4 and zone 5, but you're not getting the conditioning of working for gradually longer times in the zone that you're gonna be in for the majority of the marathon. If your intent is to run a 3:30 marathon or a 2:10 marathon or even a 2-hour marathon, you're gonna spend the majority of your time in zone 3. If you're able to, and if you're watching this in Kenya or East Africa and you're able to run that 2 hours, it's likely that you can run slightly more of the marathon in zone 4. And that's because well-trained elite athletes, the best in the world, can run very close to that LT2 for much longer. If you take the example of Supershoes and try to use this as an analogy, then let's take the extreme. You get your Supershoes out of the box and you use them for the first time on race day. What's gonna happen? Your stride length for exactly the same effort will increase. And so for your cadence, let's say 170 cadence, every minute for the entire duration of a marathon, you're hitting your calves, hamstring, glutes 1 to 2 inches more than your regular runs. And you can get away with that for the first hour, maybe even hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours. Where you're gonna feel it is that third hour, where all of a sudden, those muscles I've just mentioned, cramping, if not worse, small micro tears that eventually build up and stop you in your tracks, or at the best, slow you down. It's exactly the same with zone 3. If you are not conditioned and practicing that level and that range within zone 3, then you're not hitting that marathon conditioning, and that marathon effort will eventually marry up with your marathon pace as you get closer to the goal. So in summary, zone 3 mirrors that exact marathon intensity, the intensity that you can hold for 2 to 4 hours, making it ideal for race-specific training without the exhaustion. Let me know in the comments, is this something you already knew? Is it something that will change your training? And have you seen often zone 3 commonly talked as the gray zone?